and welcome to another edition of Rack and Roll. My name is Ashley Felpash, and I'm your host today. In today's episode, we're diving into the importance of best practices in software testing, particularly with enterprise software. By the end of today's session, you'll understand why it's crucial to involve testing from the beginning and how to create culture that values quality. My guest today is Amaan Shariff, Tryon Solutions' very own Director of Managed Services. Welcome, Amaan. Thanks for hopping on today.
Thanks for having me, Ashley. Thank you.
If you'd like to take a moment just to introduce yourself, please do, and then we'll jump into our conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. I really appreciate that. It gives an opportunity to kind of talk about managed services department and kind of what we do here at Tryon. As for myself, as you mentioned, I'm the director of managed services here, and my primary responsibilities are to lead and develop the execution of managed services offerings here, help our clients streamline operations and optimize performance. In my previous experience, I have over a decade of product and program managed experience where I've focused on building high performing teams and optimizing operations. And I think some of the goals that I'd like to do, as a director of managed services here, is to ensure that I'm aligning to our service, or aligning our services with our clients' business goals, trying delivering value through innovative solutions, and also ensuring that we're building long-term relationships, ensuring and working on quality, focusing on quality, service, and satisfaction.
Absolutely. I would say that is what drives Tryon, no doubt. So we're happy to have you on the team.
Yep,
So we'll
thank you.
dive right into the questions. Can you give the audience a clear understanding of when software testing is ideal?
Yeah, I think in order to answer that question, I think we really have to think about software testing as in a couple of different areas, right? Two different examples come to mind. One is like a jigsaw puzzle, right? I think if you wait until the end to see if all the pieces fit, you might realize that some of those pieces are missing or or don't connect properly. But if you test each section as you go, you can spot problems early and fix them before they become bigger issues. So starting testing early helps ensure everything fits together smoothly, and in the end, we recognize the value that we're getting from testing. I think another example that comes to mind is building a bridge. If you wait until the end to check the foundation or the connection to the beams, you'll realize that there's flaws there and that you need to do a major rework. But I think as you test as you go, you can identify those small issues along the way, making sure the bridge is strong and stable, and that you can actually use it properly.
Yeah, those are great analogies. I love that. So it's like if you built a bridge and had to redo it, how much money also would that cost? There's so many
Right.
factors that play into how that. So it's clear why it makes or why testing shouldn't wait till the end. But speaking of integrations and all the pieces and parts fitting together, let's explore how organizations can approach testing when are testing multiple systems and how they need to work together seamlessly. So when it comes to integrating, such as a ERP, WMS, or an OMS, how do teams ensure that all systems are aligned and tested in a way that supports the overall business needs?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. I think that's one of the biggest things people miss and fail to recognize when you're working with various systems like ERPs, WMS, and OMS systems. I think it has to be a really strategic approach that you need to take a step forward with. I think there's about 4 or 5 things that you can do to ensure that these integrations are met properly. Number one, I think you'd have to map out all the system interactions, right? Identify how these systems like ERP, WMS, OMS interact with each other. Secondly, there's always critical points, touch points that you need to focus on. So you need to determine where those critical touch points are. Pinpoint where the data flows between these systems to understand those integration areas. And another thing that I would look for is focusing on testing the integration points. Validates touch points to ensure data is consistent and ensure that those flows are correctly corrected between those systems. When we're not testing those integration touch points, then that's where you go where you get some missing information, or the flows are not going through properly, or your activity diagrams aren't working the way that you want them to work based off how you've drove uh, based off how you've drawn them out. Sorry, I can't. My words. I'm trying to use multiple words. Aligning testing efforts with business priorities. Right. I think that's one of the most critical things. If we're testing things that the business isn't looking for and it's not reaching the business overall goals, then we're testing the wrong things. And so making sure that your business is aligned with your testing is aligned with your business priorities is critical. And I think lastly, just ensure that we want to prevent bottlenecks and issues. Making sure these integrations are going across the systems that don't cause operational disturbance or any type of operational slowdowns.
I love how you emphasize the alignment across systems being tied to the business outcomes. It's not just about making software work, but making it work for the business also. So you mentioned the importance of collaboration and early involvement. That reminds me of another challenge. How is testing often seen as an afterthought, or how do you think organizations can change that perception and build a culture that respects testing from day one of the project?
Yeah, that's another good question, and I think a lot of organizations miss this. I think to make testing a priority, we need to foster a culture that values quality, right? At every stage of the development process, as I mentioned before, but the bridge example, if we're not looking at quality at every single stage, there's going to be some misses. There's going to be areas that we're going to be adding more time to later on. So instead of testing it to ensure that we're testing at every stage, we have to ensure that there's education and communication within the organization. We have to ensure that stakeholders understand what's happening earlier on so that they recognize the value of testing. When we do that, it saves time, it reduces costs, and overall improves the product quality. And that itself will show our not only the customers that we're working with, but the end user the value of what testing can do.
You're absolutely right. It's all about shifting that mindset to quality. And I like the idea of showing the impact of early testing data that you receive.
Yeah,
So
and
once
one other thing I'd like to add, I apologize, I mean, I cut get in trouble,
it's
but
okay.
I think a lot of people focus on bugs, and bugs when it comes to testing. And I think when we're focusing on meeting our customer expectations and our business requirements versus identifying bugs, then you know that really focusing on what's really critical within the organization. And then if we start involving testing from a very early stage, and including them in these different iterations, then we are having open and honest discussions around what the development looks like, what our business teams are looking for, and some of the crucial steps that are aligned with those priorities.
Exactly. Once testing becomes part of the conversation early, it leads to better planning.
Absolutely, 100%.
So that brings us to another big challenge, of course, managing resources effectively, especially when runway time is limited. How can teams balance resource capacity to avoid the last minute scramble?
Yeah, I think it starts with proper planning, right? I think we need to define clear timelines, allocate testing resources early in the project. A lot of times in many organizations, testing has become this last effort where, they're not really involved until 2, 3 months ahead of the time before the project needs to be delivered. But by involving testing early on in the iteration of the project, we're ensuring that not only those iterations being tested and moved forward with, but we're aligning that testing schedule across the development life cycle. This way, we can ensure testing is done properly and has enough time to cover all the different areas that we're trying to touch when it comes to testing.
Exactly. That's a great point. So speaking of structure, because that's really what it is, what are your thoughts on the testing increments and why is it better to approach testing throughout the development process rather than leaving it for the end?
Yeah, I think a lot of organizations are moving towards this agile centric way of doing things, uh, using framework that focus on iterative testing or iterative behavior. And I think if we are having asking our software development teams to focus on an iterative way of building, we have to focus our testing teams to also have an iterative way of thinking and testing. And when we're doing things in iterations, what really happens is where we're fixing small issues as they arise, versus having this large backlog of problems at the final stages of your development. Now you're scrambling to find resources, trying to find that right integration test point for most data people. So to make sure that those scrambling are not happening on a regular basis, we want to involve them early. We want to make sure that they're part of our iterative life cycle. And having a roadmap helps by laying out these testing milestones in parallel with the development life cycle. That way, we're not, again, cramming everything at the end in the final stage, and then testing becomes a continuous part of the process versus a last minute effort.
Yeah, I love that point about a roadmap, how it really brings that vision to life by keeping the teams all on track and involved and the communication flowing. So now as we wrap up our conversation today, what's one thing you hope our audience will take away from our discussion? How can they start improving their testing processes today?
Well, actually, I think I have more than one thing. I have a few things I think that they could take away, just because I think we've discussed on a few things, just essentially around how we integrate testing early in the planning stages, right? I think that's a big element, especially as we're doing, agile-driven development, right? Because we're not in this waterfall way of working anymore, where now teams are doing things a lot faster. We're releasing in 2 to 4 weeks period of time, so involving testing early in that process helps build a strong foundation. Another thing I think is ensuring that we have resources allocated effectively, right? If we're thinking about resources at the very end of these stages, then more than likely that runway isn't going to be there. More than likely those resources aren't going to be there. So to ensure that we have testing accounted for, we want to make sure the resources are accounted for as well. And I think a couple other things that come to mind is, collaborating closely with the development teams. I think that kind of goes without saying, but a lot of times people get so focused in their own silos, they tend to not focus on what other people are doing. And so I think bringing people along really helps with the project timeline and the success of the project. And as we just mentioned earlier, is building out that roadmap, right? Having clear milestones, tracking progress, and ensuring that there's overall coverage across that project. And then lastly, I think just be it's a culture of building a culture of quality at all stages, not only with the business, not only with the technology, but ensuring that quality is on top of everyone's mind. And I think if we have that focus and that vision, we can continue to keep focusing on building that culture of quality.
That's very practical advice, Aman. Thank you. Focusing on the culture and incremental improvements really makes the process feel achievable for teams. Thank you for sharing your expertise today and for helping explain what can sometimes feel like a daunting topic for some organizations. So thank you everyone for joining, and hope you enjoyed this episode of Rack and Roll and you found our discussion today on software testing valuable. If you have any questions or would like more information, feel free to reach out. Our contact details are provided in the description below. Until next time, take care.
Thank you.